Hi, Mike.
Hey, Julian. Today we're chatting with Rebecca Amos from the Highland Wildlife Park. She's been involved in some amazing conservation work and it includes reintroduction of wildcats.
I know. It's fascinating how much effort goes into bringing back a species like that.
Yeah.
I can't wait to hear more about the challenges and successes she's had on this project.
Well, absolutely. So let's dive in.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Mike Brampton.
And my name is Julian Ho.
Welcome to Veterinary Ramblings.
Tell you what we're going to do. We are going to ask you one of these headline questions that just gets you slightly uncomfortable. But don't worry about it. We've done this many times. You'll get a moment's discomfiture thinking, oh gosh, are they really asking me this question? You'll answer it. Then there'll be a big sigh of relief. Okay, so we're just going to ask that question. Mike?
No, you're going to answer the question.
I thought you were asking the question.
No, I always ask the question.
Yeah, I know. Oh, no.
Maybe you could perform it in unison. Maybe you could harmonise. That'd be nice.
Oh, that'd be nice, wouldn't it?
Rebecca Amos.
What? Maybe not. Maybe not.
No, okay.
No, don't suggest it, Rebecca, please. No, the difficulty we have here is that this question has caused Julian no end of problems. I don't actually know that he's ever asked this question.
I'm excited. Mate, he was about to ask it in song form. You should have let him roll.
I know I was going to bottle out at the last minute. I know I have a bit of a count. I don't know why. It's not, when it comes down to it, Rebecca, it's not that difficult a question. But I just have a real problem asking it. And I don't know, it's out of my comfort zone somehow. And I know I'm asking you to answer it and saying it's out of your comfort zone.
Have you answered it?
Yes.
So you can answer it, you just can't ask it?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's weird, isn't it?
The anticipation is killing me.
I know.
It's going to be something stupid like, what's my favourite animal, isn't it?
No, it's not. No, not at all. Mike, go on. You ask it. Go on.
The question is what is your favourite bread?
A seeded sourdough.
Okay.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
Nice, robust answer. We've had a few sourdoughs. Not many seeded sourdoughs, have we?
No.
That's a nice wrinkle there. So, are we going for sunflower seeds?
Multi-seed.
A multi-seed, a mixed seed. I will caveat it with only when toasted. I don't think it makes the best sandwiches. I think it makes the best toast.
It does, doesn't it? I like it. I use a cheese slice on my butter.
Smart.
I put
really smart.
slices of cold butter onto my sourdough, and it all soaks through and runs through the holes and onto the plate.
And then you mop it up off the plate.
Oh,
yeah.
It's great.
You got it.
Sourdough, really good for dipping in broth.
Like Scotch broth.
I do like Scotch broth, yes.
I'm not a huge fan of Scotch broth.
Oh, shh. You can't say that. Where are you?
Oh, sorry. I'm not a huge fan of the Scottish broth. No, the Macbeth. What?
No, don't say that word. I'm in a play.
Oh, where are you right now?
I think it's okay. I actually don't know many Scottish people who are that hot on Scotch broth.
No.
I think it's okay. If we were talking about like iron brew, then you'd have a point.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And deep fried Mars bars.
Again, mostly for tourists.
Oh.
Iron brew and macaroni pie. That's what really gets the heart of the people.
I like a macaroni pie. That's nice, that. One of my favourite meals ever was macaroni pie and a pint of iron brew.
Very Scottish.
So how long have you been in Scotland for?
I have been in Scotland since 2015. I was in Edinburgh until 2021. And then I had a brief sojourn in England that I don't like to talk about. And then I came back to the Highlands in 2022.
What is it you like about the Highlands?
About the Highlands?
Yeah.
It's beautiful. It's majestic. I have a lot of outdoorsy hobbies that go down very well in the Highlands. I like to swim. I like to climb. I like to forage. I also like how the weather does what you expect it to still. I feel like it's one of the last vestiges of Northern Europe where spring arrives at springtime and winters are wintry. So that's reassuring at the moment. How long for, I wouldn't like to say. But for now, at least, that feels nice. And I like the people I work with.
It is changing though, isn't it? You're based in Cairngorm, aren't you?
Yeah, I've had 3 winters here in Aviemore,
Mhm.
and each one has been milder and less snowy than the one before. And I appreciate that's a pretty small n number of 3, but in the context of everything else that's going on, it's enough to make me nervous.
Mm.
And the sort of mountain industries, particularly the ski slope and things, you're seeing them actively trying to diversify, so they know what's coming.
Yeah.
So what sort of foraging do you do?
Oh, well, what is out there? Bark, berries, mushrooms.
Do you get many
Roots.
mushrooms?
Yeah, hunters. It's fantastic chanterelle country up here.
Is it?
Mhm.
And black trumpets as well, then, if you get any chanterelles.
Yeah, we get a few black trumpets, although not actually as many as you might think. There's not a very diverse tree scape up here. You're getting pine or birch, and that's your lot. And the chanterelles seem to outcompete a lot of things, but a fair amount in the bolete section as well. We get porcinis, we get penny buns.
Oh, my favourite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just being radioed. I'm just going to check it's not important.
Okay.
Yes.
You're in the Cairngorms.
Mm.
You've just been disturbed by a radio call, and we've been talking about the environment and things. What exactly do you do, Rebecca?
That's a great question. I am a vet at the Highland Wildlife Park. I am chiefly in charge of looking after the collection here at the Highland Wildlife Park, so the on-show collection, but I also assist on multiple conservation projects that are run by the Society, including the Saving Wildcat Release Project and the Breed for Reintroduction Medicinal Leech Project.
Right.
Let's pick up on the leeches in a moment, because the Wildcat project hasn't gone on very well recently, has it?
Oh, has it not?
Have I not read of 2 deaths in the last few weeks?
Oh, you have? I think to paint that as poor performance. So I think most reintroduction programs anticipate pretty high mortality rates. And my colleague Alice, who couldn't join us, who is the sort of lead vet for the project, would be able to give you better numbers. But I don't think it's unusual to consider sort of a 60% survival rate after 12 months a success. And at the moment, we have lost 2 out of 24 animals after nearly 2 years. So we're doing pretty well, all things considered.
Which obviously I don't have access to that information. I can just pick up what I see in the press. And
yeah.
Yeah.
Two
sensationalism.
captive bred wildcats dead weeks after release. One had starved to death and one got hit by a car.
Yeah, to be fair, I was expecting, I was actually having recurring nightmares when the first cohort went out last year that I would hit one with my car. I just kept having this dream again and again that I'd be driving home. So I'm actually relieved that we haven't seen more in the way of human-related deaths. Now, obviously, that includes the deaths that we know of, but because all of our cats have radio collars, we're pretty confident that we know where everything is. The starvation one was a little bit of a shame. It turns out that there is a cyclical vole population crash that approximately every 4 years the voles go League of Shadows on themselves, presumably to limit predator numbers for subsequent generations, and this was one of those years.
Right.
Interesting.
Well, for those people who have just tuned into VR and who may not come from our neck of the woods, as in the UK, what is a wildcat and why should we want to introduce them to the wild?
Oh, again, you're asking me questions that my colleagues would be much better placed to answer. But yeah, the wildcats are a subpopulation of the European wildcat, which is a small felid, basically the size of a large domestic cat. And they have been endemic to Scotland for hundreds, thousands of years. And they went functionally extinct in the wild. Oh gosh, I hope I'm getting this right. Functionally extinct in the wild, I think, in 2017. I've probably got the dates wrong. I may even have the technical terms wrong. Like I say, I am the supporting vet on the project, not the project ambassador. But as far as I understand
it's to give a flavour.
As far as I understand it, it's a cat that is not genetically able to sustain its wild population without support from a project like ours. So we have taken wild cats from captivity, plus there was an individual who was wild caught to breed in an ex situ facility here at the Highland Wildlife Park, and for their offspring to be rehabilitated back into the wild.
Well,
but
No,
I'm not super confident about the terminology and everything. So yeah.
Yeah, no,
We can check
good
it.
enough. I believe it's quite difficult sometimes telling what is a real Scottish wildcat, isn't it? Because they've
Yes.
interbred, haven't they, over the years?
Yeah. So hybridization is probably the biggest threat to the wildcat, along with human wildlife conflict, but that's a more obvious issue. But yeah, hybridization with feral domestic cats has ultimately caused the sort of genetic extinction of the species in the wild. And they do look to the untrained eye like silver tabbies. There are differences, and we are using a system of pelage scoring to help positively identify wildcats. And there are some significant differences, but you need like really good photos from all angles to be able to do that. So if you're passing a cat in the night and it looks like a silver tabby, it would be next to impossible to tell whether that was a feral tabby, a hybrid, or a true wildcat, except that you're not going to see a true wildcat unless it's one of ours, in which case it's wearing a radio collar, which makes it really obvious.
It's probably obvious then.
Yeah.
And they were not only interbred, but I think a lot of them were actually, I think you mentioned human interaction, but a lot of them were killed by people thinking that they were taking their wild stock, and particularly rabbits and things.
No, it's mostly birds, chickens and pheasants. So obviously there's a huge
Grouse and what have you.
Private land ownership up here. It is very linked to the sort of hunting and whatnot. And again, this is an incredibly sensitive area. There's a lot of sort of active conversation happening between the project and a lot of the local stakeholders at the moment. We are engaging a lot with the stakeholders. We're also doing a lot of community outreach to talk about it. We're even the project are hosting lectures for staff here at the park so that when we're asked questions we can talk in more detail. But it is quite a sensitive topic. A lot of people have emotions that run quite high about it. Sometimes it's people's backyard chickens and things that are being taken. It can sometimes be difficult to prove that it was a wildcat, but again, we have a record of their movements, and sometimes we can say that yes, it is wildcats and they're doing what wildcats should be doing. And that ultimately, from a rewilding perspective, which isn't a word I like to use very often, but this idea of living alongside predators is not something we've really had to do in this country very much for a while. Certainly not these sort of felid type hunters. The best we've had for ages has been foxes, badgers, especially up here in Scotland with the sort of reintroduction of the white-tailed seagulls, the wildcats. People are talking about other carnivorous and predatory species. It is going to start to become more and more important for people to, or for us to have a plan as to how we all live together.
We hear talk of reintroducing wolves and other large predators like that as well. Is that a realistic thing? And is it a real thing?
I think
in your
not at the moment. I think the Wildcat Project is teaching us a lot about that and about the sort of difficulties that still exist. So it's a useful project from that perspective. I know people talk about things like lynx quite a lot. I think perhaps a really big point that it almost seems silly to talk about at this stage, but a wildcat is not a threat to human safety. Something like a wolf or a lynx would be, which I think would change things completely, irrespective of concurrent land use. But again, there are people far better qualified than me to chat about this sort of thing.
Right. So two of the species that I understand are in difficulty in Scotland, and particularly Cairngorms, are the dotterel and the capercaillie. Now, both of those. I'm going
to confess to never having even heard of a dotterel.
Okay.
Which is probably pretty shameful. Again, I wish Alice was here because she is an absolute champion for Scottish wildlife. So she works on the capercaillie project. To be fair, the society for which we both work is a partner in capercaillie restoration projects. But yes, the capercaillie is in dire straits and we do what we can to help. There's certainly no dotterel project associated with the society, but I bet you anything Alice could tell you about what's going on with them.
I suppose really the question was not so much on the success of the dotterel preservation, because the dotterel's obviously, the capercaillie is a ground nesting bird, and the dotterel is probably under as much, if not more, threat from wet ground and the climate change bringing in longer, warmer, wetter winters than a short, harsh, cold winter and then a drier summer.
In Scotland means midges all year round, doesn't it? Let's face it.
Scotland, it does actually. They're going to have midges for Christmas if they're not careful with all this warming going on.
I used to change from turkey.
Very true. But I suppose the question I'm trying to get to is wildcats versus ground nesting birds. Is there not a conflict there, or am I?
There is. Obviously, historically, they coexisted for thousands of years. At the moment, the sad thing is both of them are currently present in such low numbers that they don't seem to really encounter each other very much. The chances are, if one starts to take off, it might have an impact on the other. And you mentioned wetlands and things, and like I say, I haven't got a clue where dotterels live, but we're also reintroducing beavers, for example, which are going to definitely have an impact on the ground and everything. But the fact remains that these things did all live together before we limited the amount of space that they have to share and brought in all of these extra pressures. So it still ultimately comes down to human impact, human wildlife conflict, human-based climate. We've squeezed them into a space where they come into conflict with each other, but it would have been completely normal and natural for a wildcat to eat a capercaillie back when there were loads of wildcats and loads of capercaillies.
Yeah, for sure.
I wonder whether in 10 years' time, if we have you back on the podcast, we'll be saying, so how did the rewilding of de-extincted mammoths go in the cave? Do you have any view on, we call it de-extinction. We know it's not really de-extinction. It's coming up with a genetic modification of some sort of animal that's been retrieved from some sort of DNA database. Any thoughts? Are you anxious to see Tasmanian tigers again and giant sleuths and doo-doos?
It's one of those things, isn't it? I often think this about history as well, about how much time needs to pass for our perceptions to shift. I went to the Edinburgh Dungeons with my little sister at the weekend and did have a jolly laugh going in the Iron Maiden and pretending to be tortured. And I thought, people died horrible deaths. How long ago does it need to be for us to feel differently about it? And the de-extinction thing, I think, is very similar. A big one recently would be the northern white rhino. It's just extinct. We were in a position to take frozen samples. We have the AI techniques that we could potentially bring that animal back. You talk about, the Tasmanian tiger. That's a bit longer ago, but not that long ago. We've got videos of it. A mammoth seems far-fetched. But the other things that we perhaps need to consider is that northern white rhino, or at least for a little while yet, should have existed in this climate, in this modern world that we're in. The mammoth couldn't. Why on earth would we bring a mammoth back when we're about to go into global warming, climate crisis? So I think
because next we'll need mammoth groomers shaving them all to get rid of that really thick coat.
Sure. Yeah.
Tastes good. I think for the benefit.
How long will it be after the first mammoth is de-extincted before we are able to order mammoth steaks? It won't be long, will it?
We don't eat elephant steaks. So maybe people do. I don't know.
No, but people will want to. They want to have dodo anyway.
Well, apparently it didn't taste very nice, though, did it? It was just really easy to catch, by all accounts.
Apparently so. But they probably cooked it wrong. You'd sous vide it these days, wouldn't you?
Yeah, probably.
A nice peppercorn sauce on it or something.
Yeah.
Cumin infusion. Little coriander foam on the top. Very nice.
Very avant-garde.
Did you think when you were at vet school that you'd be doing this? You'd be looking into rewilding or restocking or reintroducing?
I always wanted to work with conservation. I went to vet school specifically with that aim in mind, which was very naive of me because it's not really a job. I think, working for a zoological collection that has a decent conservation sort of department is as close as I think most vets are able to get to, whilst using their qualifications, being vets, working in conservation and paying the rent. You can go and do it for free all over the place or for next to nothing. And those jobs are so important. But financially, conservation is a very difficult place to work as a vet long term. So I did think I would. And actually, I think this is probably, now that I understand the industry better, about as good as it's going to get. And I'm quite happy.
I find this fascinating because surely everybody must have said to you initially you don't want to be a vet, and then you say you want to be a conservation vet or a wildlife vet. Even more people must have said, "Oh, you can't be doing that."
I think, or certainly I was never put off being a vet because I trained I began on my trajectory back in the olden days when vets were rich, or when people still believed that, when most vets were sort of old white dudes who owned their own practices and were fiddling the numbers. And so they all were rich,
Oh, I think we might have to leave there. So lovely talking to Rebecca Amos this evening. And sorry, carry on.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
So I wasn't
those
discouraged.
bad old days.
I wasn't discouraged. Whereas now, of course, there's a very early plateau in the career development of most vets. You qualify, you're a junior vet or a trainee, you do your internship, and then you can specialize if you want, but financially, you're always working for a corporate. Very few will make triple figures, or at least at the moment. And so it does become a bit of a do it for the love of it thing. And of course, they've got you over a barrel, haven't they? Because everybody wants to do this job. Everybody wants to do my job.
Yeah. So I suppose the peripherals are what make it for you. The fact you're in a part of the world that you love, able to do the things you like. We haven't got into climbing yet. When Mike turned his back for a second, we'll chat about climbing because that's something that you and I share.
Right.
So are you mountain, rock, both?
Both. I wouldn't claim to be super great at it. It's very much more sort of grade 2-3 scrambling max. When we get to the big heavy rope stuff, what was that documentary about the chap who climbed up that massive chimney?
Oh, Capitan.
Yes. It's nothing like that. It's me farting about in the mountains with my dad most of the time.
I know Alex Cobbled myself. I would not be doing that.
No.
Give me some ropes and I'd do it, but
yeah,
not without.
Bit much. Yeah. So yeah, it's mostly scrambling. Very much a fan of climbing from a get to the top of the mountain perspective, as opposed to just going to a face and playing on it all day. Although I do enjoy that too. And there's a decent climbing wall nearby for when the winter comes and I can't get near the tops of the mountain. Well, you can get near them. The rock's just deeply buried under snow.
Yes. Oh, wonderful. I've done some nice winter walking and a bit of ice climbing in the Cairngorms in the past.
Yeah, it is nice. It's the sort of thing that I am not brave enough to have a go at on my own. I have to try and bully someone into coming with me.
Yeah, never do it. Never go on your own. It's a bad thing.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
And so, how long have you been at the RZSS?
Since 2022.
Sorry, you did say earlier.
Yeah. So I've only been here for about 2.5 years. And it's good.
Do you see the job? You've got the Wildcats thing, and you can see the job evolving into lots of those rewildings, can you? And
I mean, it's a good. We're in a good location. There's a lot of native species work happening, and the society is very active in that. And that obviously opens doors and connections for projects moving on. Ultimately, the job that I am paid to do is to care for the animals on site, including those that are part of the ex situ breeding programs. But that is my job. So anything extra, which includes writing disease risk assessments, going out and doing field work, that is additional to my responsibilities. But that's what makes it exciting. That's what makes it an interesting job to do. And it adds a lot of purpose to what can sometimes be quite a sort of ethically challenging position from the zoo perspective. I think there's not really anything that I wouldn't accept to have a job where I feel like I'm making a difference. It's not fantastic pay. It's pretty terrible work-life balance, but I would still choose this because I feel like I'm helping.
Cool.
So what does your day look like? You wake up 5 o'clock on a Monday morning, go for a run up to the top of the mountain, then back down and you start work. What happens there?
You're not a million miles off.
Swim in the
go
lock.
through the gates.
No, swim in the lock first, because
I do.
Rebecca's at Aviemore. She goes up to the top of Cairngorm. She's going to go past the lock on the way back to Aviemore.
Easy.
True.
So you're actually quite close. It's not unusual that I will get in that very lock on my way to work. So we start at 8, but I have usually taken a dip before that. And then the day is usually, I would say, 50-50 clinical work and paperwork. Also a lot of meetings. And then depending on what time of year it is, oftentimes then we'll set traps for overnight work with the wildcats in the field. Obviously, if we get things in the dead of night and we're out all night doing that, I do not necessarily have to come in at 8 o'clock the next morning. But again, that's a balancing act that Alice and I have to strike because there's the two of us. Although we are supported by the vet team. We're technically all one vet team. So that RZSS has the Highland Wildlife Park and Edinburgh Zoo. And we're technically one vet team, although Alice and I are based up here and Steph, Barbara and Simon are based in Edinburgh. But we can, if we arrange it ahead of time, get cover up here if we need to do extra night shifts or whatever.
Because that's 2-3 hours away, isn't it?
It's about 2.5 hours, yeah.
Yeah.
So they would need to come up here. That's not something we could just do at the drop of a hat.
Sure.
Okay. So you sort of do your own out of hours then?
We do all our own out of hours, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Particularly if it involves trapping in the evening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this week and last week, poor Alice has been basically nocturnal. In that I've done the day shifts and she's done the night shifts. But we will swap it about if we need to.
What other animals do you have there?
At the park. So on the conservation side, we have the wildcats and a lot of invertebrate projects at the moment. I think that's it. Obviously, we get a lot of migratory birds that come through that we work with adjacent projects. But in terms of the captive collection that's on show to the public, we've got pretty much all climate adapted species. So they're all called climate adapted species because of where we are. So a lot of Arctic circle species, a lot of steppe species, or a lot of high altitude species. So we have Himalayan species, Turkmenian markhor, snow leopards.
I was jokingly going to say, have you got snow leopards?
Yeah, we have snow leopards.
I knew you had, because I checked on the website earlier. But
Okay.
they are my favourite felid.
Are they? They are pretty cute. And very well behaved. We do quite a lot of training with as many of the species as we can. As a vet, I am a big advocate of minimally invasive procedures. I'm not a huge fan of knocking things out, and obviously the sorts of animals that we work with from a safety perspective and from a wild animals handling perspective, we have to be very careful. We can't easily necessarily get samples or information or diagnostics without knocking them out, but we have been working really hard with a lot of our species. So we have our snow leopards, our Amur tigers, our polar bears, our Przewalski horses, our Eurasian elk, and our forest reindeer are all trained or desensitized for, at the very least, hand injection. Most of them will also tolerate blood draw, microchip. A couple of them we can get the ultrasound on if we need to. And Louise, who is our incredible nurse, and I do most of that with the keepers, and we've put a huge amount of time into making it so that we don't have to anesthetize things for testing. So particularly when it comes to like pre-movement tests, when animals need just health checks prior to being exported or released into the wild, we just need samples. And if it was a dog or a cat, you could just take those samples. Whereas for the most part with zoo animals, you have to fully anesthetize them to get just a bit of blood. And so we're working super hard on trying to not do that, because it's risky, it's expensive, it's time consuming. There's a lot of it that needs to be washed afterwards. And if we don't have to do it, then that's great. But it also means that the animals are our friends and they are compliant, they are positive, they have a good interaction. This is the thing. I did my time. I worked farm vet, mixed practice, dogs and cats emergencies for years. And the irony of being a vet because you love animals is that animals hate you. And I'm finally in a position for the first time in a 15-year career where they don't hate me. They love it when I show up because I bring all the treats.
Brilliant. I was lucky enough to be at a
Brilliant.
zoo a few weeks back taking blood from dolphins.
Nice.
But they're all trained
Yeah, of course.
for bloodletting. And so they just roll up onto the side of their pool and present their tails, and you then just take the blood and give them
And it's so much nicer for them.
Yeah.
And it means that if they're poorly, they have such a positive association with that process. It's so normal to them. An example would be we had our big Amur tiger, Box, was very poorly. And he was super wobbly, super sort of dull, ataxic. But he was so so food motivated and so keen for the training that we were able to get him to stagger over to his training station, got his tail out. We were able to take blood to determine what was wrong with him. We were able to give him IV fluids. We were able to give him subcut injections. His treatment, compared to him lying in the middle of the enclosure where we couldn't reach him, we wouldn't have been able to safely sedate him because we didn't know why he was dopey, but he was too awake for us to safely just go in. We would have just had to have left him there and watched. But because he was trained, we were able to get him over and fix him, basically.
God, amazing. Absolutely incredible.
Yeah, he's a good
Wow.
boy.
Yeah.
How
And
many
it's-
bears have you got?
How many bears?
Yeah.
We have 4.
Mike gets on a plane and a boat and goes all the way up to the Arctic Circle to see his.
That would be pretty cool, though. I'd really like to see them in the wild.
Would you?
Yeah. That's,
Mike
that's
does
one of my
pretty cool
missions.
stuff. You should look at some of Mike's photos.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm quite envious of that.
I could just drive up to Aviemore.
You could.
Yeah.
You'd get some nice pictures. Um,
And what sort of enclosures are they in there?
So, a predecessor of our current animal operations manager, as I understand it, claims to have pioneered a new sort of way of managing polar bears that allows them a lot more space with an electric fence. And they actually have quite nice big enclosures. I have absolutely no idea of the acreage or hectareage, but they're certainly the largest I've ever seen for any bear species in a lot of the zoos that I visited. And they all have freshwater ponds. They have hills to climb. They have trees to, I say, rub against or completely obliterate in Brody's case because he's naughty. But yeah, they actually have quite a lot of space. We are fortunate, I think, up here at the Highland Wildlife Park, compared to a lot of the older city zoos, space is not an issue. We have miles of space.
I worked one summer at Chessington Zoo many years back when it was still a zoo, and they had 2 polar bears there, and it was miserable seeing them because they just they exhibited such stereotypic behavior.
Yeah, I remember seeing one in my defense, I was 12 when my parents took me to SeaWorld in Florida. We obviously wouldn't go now, but at the time we were naive and didn't know any better. And I remember seeing, and even at 12, I thought that poor bear looked absolutely miserable. I didn't even clock poor Tillicum, but the bear landed with me even as a kid. And our bears are pretty well, actually. We don't see stereotyping behaviors in them really at all.
That's great.
Happy boys.
And the Krasnolski's horses, so I've always loved those. I'm not a particularly horsey person. Horses gave me up as their vet 27 years ago, and rightly so. But they look amazing. They're the steppe horses, aren't they?
Yeah.
Oldest, phylogenetically, the oldest horse.
I believe so, and the only surviving wild species of horse on the planet as well.
Yeah.
Wow.
They're incredible. And they're quite not tame, but relatively simple, are they?
We work very hard with them. So we actually have a lady called Bonnie Mealand, who is an equine podiatrist and behavioral specialist, who very kindly donates her time and has been working with the herd and the keeper team for over a decade, I think now. And we as a team have, and the keepers are amazing at this. And obviously, since the vet team was joined at the park, we do it too. But we do a lot of just positive desensitization, positive interaction. And we are able, for most of the horses, to do things like foot trims, like I say, hand injections, which means we don't have to do darts and things.
Yeah.
Occasionally we've had to put eye drops in, things like that. We got a new stallion about a year ago, and he's obviously not used to that, but he comes in with the girls, he just stands with us. It is free contact, so we go as a group and we're all keen to look out for each other, but he's getting bolder and bolder. It's a very slow, very gentle process. And we're lucky to be guided by Bonnie, who has obviously decades of equine behavioral experience under her belt to help us with that. I have to admit, I have heard from my colleagues at the zoo that she did attempt the same approach with zebra, and it was an unmitigated disaster.
Oh, really?
So there must be a difference.
I was going to say, they're not stripy horses, though, are they?
No,
They're
they're
not.
not stripy horses. It's a common misconception, I think. Zebra They're a bit yampy. Yeah.
I have to say, I've never heard the term equine podiatrist. Farrier. It's all I think of.
I think it's
horses' feet.
different because
But
it's the soft trimming. There's no horseshoe.
yeah, of course,
Yeah.
and their problems are very different to the problems that shod horses get.
Yeah, they're on completely different underfoot conditions as well. So they're out on the main reserve, which is basically grassland. They don't really spend any time at all on concrete or sand. They only ever run when they want to, which is very rarely. So really the only issues we have with their feet is sometimes the toes get a little long, and the equine podiatrist, she's amazing. We just nibble away at those toes for the most part. There's not much in the way of reshaping. I'm sure she would love to do more. And it very much is down to the horses to decide when Bonnie is finished.
Sure. But horses decide love is finished very early on my treatment with them.
I think that was the first one you saw, wasn't it, Julian?
Yes.
Yeah.
and didn't see anything else for about 3 or 4 weeks after that.
Oh dear.
Yeah. Well, that's what a kick in the head and a subdural hemorrhage will do to you.
All right, do be like that.
You'd be like that.
Which is your favourite then, out of all of these animals you're working with?
I have a soft spot for the elk.
Okay.
Yeah, I am very soft on the elk. But the polar bears as well. I never saw myself as a carnivore girl, but I think because I spend so much time with them and they're so sweet. I constantly look at them. We obviously don't do free contact with the polar bears,
No.
but I'm looking at them through the bars and they're so sweet and they're so pleased to see me and they're so gentle when they take their treats or whatever. And I think, oh, you wouldn't hurt me, would you? Obviously they would.
That's right.
But it's sometimes really hard to believe because they're so cute. I do genuinely think that they would kill me, but probably by accident. Just one splat. you
Yeah.
know?
Their feet are so huge, aren't they?
Yeah,
I dealt with polar bears when I was at Chessington Zoo, and they were massive. And when one of them went up to the cage and had mouth fully open and tried to eat me because they weren't very friendly, I could probably have stood on the lower jaw and my head on the upper jaw without having to crouch too much.
That sounds a bit hyperbolic, but I do know what you mean.
No, very
Are you
small.
a very small
Oh, is that
man?
I'm very
That's
small.
it.
If you're looking at me on a 14-inch computer,
That's just life size. Okay, fine.
Yeah. And it's actually larger than life size, actually, but that's the thing. So are you... Did you actually say that you give the polar bears treats?
Well, it's not treats, it's their training incentives.
Yes. Okay, they're training incentives.
Yeah.
But you
Well, as
hand
in-
feed the
As
polar
in,
bear.
here you are, polar bear, and you'll extend your hand through the cage and give the bear...
No part of me goes onto the bear side of the fence.
Right.
So their favorite food, or the food that we use most for them, is cod liver oil. So
Okay.
it's just a washing up bottle full of cod liver oil that I just scoosh through the bars, and they just
Open wide.
open their mouths and drink it. Yeah.
Right in here. In
Yeah.
here, please, Rebecca.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like literally, yeah.
Where did they come from?
Oh, I know that the two big boys came from Germany. I think they both came from Germany. Certainly one of them did. And our wee boy Brody was born here and he hasn't left yet. Victoria, who is our elderly female, is just younger than me, and I don't know where she came from. That's like back in the annals of time.
The only reason I ask that is that up in Svalbard we're seeing a shift because of climate change. The sea ice is heading north rapidly, and that means that more and more bears are getting trapped on land for the summer. So they're adapting, and because there's no sea ice, there's no fish, there are no seals. Therefore, the bears are adapting their hunting strategies to take reindeer.
Interesting.
And you saying that cod liver oil is their treat makes me wonder what their key diet is, because there are bears that will go towards salmon and elk. There are bears that will concentrate on seals and fish and whatever it is that they can find, maybe a bit of moss and a bit of lichen to supplement it occasionally.
So
Or
this is
marmalade sandwiches.
this is a really
No, that's
interesting
southern.
one.
They're Peru.
Oh,
Peru.
they're all right.
Yeah.
And actually polar bear diet is, I've been doing a lot of research into polar bear diets recently because we are trying to rejig this a little bit, because there is quite a bit of research going on, and I'm wondering if we've been even talking to the same person, because it was an Alaskan scientist actually who came to give a lecture here not that long ago. And in terms of what they should be eating, in terms of the source, I think, as you say, it's a little bit like orca. It depends very much on the geographic location, and it's going to vary. But in terms of composition, they're not really carnivores, they're lipivores. And actually the percentage of fat that we should be giving them should be way, way higher. And what we're finding with what's available supply wise for us, cod liver oil and lard are our two most achievable options for that. It's beef lard, obviously not a species that they would come across really at all in the wild, but you won't be surprised to hear that commercially available seal blubber, not really a thing these days, although back in the day perhaps used to be. And there's maybe an argument for whale oil, but I don't really want to open that can of worms either. So
you know, I heard today that there have been new whale hunting licenses issued in Iceland for the one company and one person that hunts and captures whales in Iceland. However, his market is Japan, but the Japanese have rejected Icelandic whale because it doesn't meet their environmental standards and their health and hygiene standards.
I think there's a little bit of hypocrisy going on there.
There might be also because, of course, Japan has now launched another mission down to the Antarctic to hunt their own whales.
I remember reading as well something about them putting it on the menus for school dinners to actually create a market. And why would they be importing when they're trying to support their own sort of domestic market anyway? I mean, I kind of feel like if nobody wants to eat it, just leave it alone. But it's probably, and I don't know much about it, but I bet it's something stupid like there's one product that simply cannot be replaced and it has to be made of whale oil, and everyone gets it from Japan, and they need to do something with the rest of the carcass, and it's probably Formula One oil grease or something that has to come from whales, and for that reason this entire abominable industry exists.
Or when mixed with pangolin scales provides the
that critical melting point that enables the rocket to put the next satellite in the link of satellites.
Exactly. That puts Elon Musk in the space car.
It's a really difficult equation though, isn't it? Because we know that the Faroes kill more whales than they could ever possibly eat or cope with. Just the sheer hell of killing whales. And yet potentially there's a requirement, or potentially there could be a requirement to supplement the polar bear's diet in your area
with whale.
I think from an ethical perspective, bearing in mind that there are other factors around keeping bears in captivity and whether or not we should be doing it at all, I think to sink our hands further into that quagmire of ethics by adding in sanctioned whale meat is probably not the play. I think if we could prove
a dolphin a snack they can eat between meals without ruining their appetite.
Finger of fudge is just enough. I feel like Edinburgh has a surplus of penguins, but no, I think it would probably be a better bet to stop keeping. If we could prove that we can't feed bears properly in captivity, then it's probably better that we don't keep bears in captivity than start buying whale carcasses off of the Faroe Islands.
I was just thinking, I mean, we're always told at college that you shouldn't eat a polar bear liver because if you do, you'll die of hypervitaminosis A. I was just thinking that actually the livers must have evolved, if they are lipivores, to have a massive overproduction of the intermediary enzymes in the deoxidation pathway, mustn't they? And I was trying to remember back to my biochemistry days, but I can't remember whether vitamin A is an essential factor in the nuclear oxidation pathway. I don't think it
I
is.
didn't think it was, no.
No.
I think there, and this again is something that I wish I knew more about. If I could just be paid to go off and study polar bears, I would. But another thing that they do that is really fascinating, and it's something that we do see quite a lot in most of the species we have up here in these cold adapted species, but in the polar bears the most dramatically, is that seasonal appetite drive and that complete body shift. So like our big guy Walker can weigh up to 800 kilos at this time of year when he's at his heaviest, but he can drop down to 420, 450 in the summer. And our big guy Arctos, he will eat upwards of 30 kilos of meat a day plus all of the fat and the oil that we give him. And yet in the summer, in the spring, so in April, we can't even persuade him to take one little bottle of oil and maybe 2 kilos of meat. And that's driven by them, even with their natural cycles perhaps not quite matching up, because it's definitely milder here than it is where they should come from. And I think metabolically, they're so cool. And I would love to say take blood from them twice a week for 2 years and study that whole endocrine profile. I just think that would be fascinating. Look at bile acid, look at everything. I think they are trained. I still think it would perhaps be difficult to justify bi-weekly blood sampling.
Well, you could do fecal metabolomics, couldn't you?
Yeah. So we have got some quite good lab relationships, and we've looked, for example, historically at like fecal glucocorticoid metabolites to look at cortisol levels. And we have done, certainly for a lot of the conservation projects, a lot of like genetic barcoding for like fecal components. And yeah, we probably could do a lot more in the way of endocrine metabolism on the feces. I think part of the issue is because we're still getting the diets right, and because the boys in particular share an enclosure, we often have a poo that it might be a fresh one, it might be a couple of days old, we don't know which bear it was from, it might be really wet because we only had salmon that day. And yeah, we would need probably much more controlled circumstances to be able to do that well. Whereas at least with the blood sampling, I have the clinical record of the situation. I know the exact moment when the blood was taken. I would have a bit more awareness on that one, but it would be interesting. It's something that I would love to be able to look more into. But as I say, butter over too much bread.
Butter indeed over too much bread. These are all animals with backbones. You mentioned that you have quite a big invertebrate collection there. And you mentioned earlier, quite tantalizingly, a very great Hirudinite medicinalis. Do you want to tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so I'm evangelical about this project. So obviously, Hiruda medicinalis, the original medicinal leech, is pretty thin on the ground. There are 3 sites in England, 1 in Wales, and 3 in Scotland that currently still have a population of Hiruda medicinalis. So we have set up an ex situ breed for release program, and we had babies this year. Ours were first. You can tell ZSL from me. They just have a quicker comms team. And yeah, we actually had a bit of a disease outbreak at the beginning of the year, which was incredibly challenging and quite upsetting. But as a sort of clinical exercise, was so fascinating. And again, it's just all it's made me want to do is just wish that I could be a full-time leech medicine researcher, because it was really interesting. Obviously, there's next to nothing out there in terms of published data. And almost everything that does exist pertains to the leech's use in human medicine.
Yeah.
Everything that we found about their gut microbiome, everything we found about the activity of antibiotics is basically because we're going to put this leech on a person and we don't want that person to catch anything and the leech isn't supposed to survive. None of it helped me in trying to fix the leeches. And we were looking at, it was a dermal problem that they developed, although it became systemic. And like just looking for treatment options that we could safely administer. We were looking at topical preparations because I was nervous about effects on the gut microbiome, because they're basically just a bit of gut, aren't they? That's all they are.
They are, yeah.
So that felt like something I didn't want to disrupt too much. So we were looking at topical preparations that would be non-irritant. So obviously they're aquatic, and there are products available for fish, but fish have skin and normal intestines. And most of the products that are available for fish would be incredibly irritant to leeches because their skin essentially functions like a mucosa. And obviously there are things that are available for invertebrates. I have done quite a lot of work with big spiders and things, and obviously there's all of the apiary vet stuff that is available. But again, it's powders. You can't put that on because also a lot of the stuff that's available for bees comes in, like, you buy it by the kilo. And at this point, I think we had 14 leeches. I didn't need that.
Several lifetime supply for each.
Exactly. So I ended up treating them like a frog with no bones, in that they were semi-aquatic with a sort of skin that works a bit like a mucosa. And there's quite a lot of data out there for topical preparations for frogs or amphibia. So we went down that route. And we did have some positive results. We certainly extended survival time once we started using topical treatments. And we did actually save one leech. One leech did survive the clinical outbreak, and it was the leech that had the most treatments. I don't want to talk too much because I am presenting this in a couple of weeks at BTZS. I don't want to give away any spoilers.
Oh, so you just about after that.
Well, that's it, basically. But it opened so many doors into what does sepsis look like? What do we consider pathogens? We've been incredibly strict with biosecurity. We've put together quite a good disease risk assessment, but at the same time, we still ended up with an issue. So where is it coming from? How does it develop? And it linked into feeding times. We learned loads about when's a good time to feed the leeches. Why would they regurgitate? How long does that blood take to even break down in their digestive system? More and more questions came from trying to answer the first few. So I'm hoping it's going to generate a ton of papers, but
got a whole PhD in that.
Well, exactly.
Several. Huge.
Several.
Yeah, it's really exciting. I wish I had more time.
Although I'm nervous now that you'll trigger a whole wave of young student vets who are going, hang on a minute, Lumbricus terrestris. We don't know.
Yeah,
Honestly,
right.
but it's so exciting.
Yeah. Why is the saddle always at this section of segments?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think it's really cool. I think we underestimate invertebrates at our peril. I think invertebrate medicine is the future because we're going to be using bugs in food production. We're going to be using bugs in our waste disposal, and those bugs will need veterinary care, or at the very least at that sort of like government sort of level, they'll need like veterinary understanding.
Veterinary knowledge,
I'm getting in on the ground floor. I want to be bug vet.
That's good. Unless we killed them all with overuse of parasiticides, but that's another
Get
story.
me started.
How can you get you started?
We have this thing on Veterinary Rambling that we started 3 or 4 years ago called 60 Second CPD, where we invite our guest to lecture for 60 seconds on a subject. You weren't told in advance that this may be a thing, and so we wouldn't spring it upon you unless you desperately felt you wanted to.
No,
I think we've had much more than 60 seconds of CPD about bears, about leeches, about wildcats. Do you have anything that you're bursting to tell us? Any new project? Any you want to do? Or?
Not really. I mean, the big things that I'm the most passionate about are, native species conservation, training and desensitization to limit invasive procedures, and the magnificence of leeches. And we've pretty much covered it. I mean, I could talk more about the magnificence of leeches if you wanted to, because they are so charismatic. They're inquisitive. They have preferences. I was actually up a mountain not that long ago, and I met a girl and I was chatting away to her, and she had written her PhD on learning and culture in marine limpets. And at the time I thought, what? I get it. They're so cute. They have so much character about them. And we've obviously had baby leeches born, and some of them were displaying really weird behaviors. And we were like, is this developmental? Is there something wrong with them? Or are they playing? Is it play? There was that video out literally just, I think it was like last week, about like REM sleep, evidence of REM sleep in spiders. I just don't think we pay bugs enough attention.
I know, incredible.
So
I don't think we pay any of our other species that we share nature with enough.
No.
Well, that's true.
No, the octopuses. There we go.
Yeah.
Never another one of those.
I'm intrigued by Eric the Leech's character and how punchy he gets on 2 pints of iron brew on a Saturday night.
Honestly, they've all got their little attitudes. They're great.
having delivered a CPD over the course of 60 seconds, we normally present the lecturer with a CPD certificate. Now,
Well, I didn't do it though.
Mike and I have had this sort of chat conversation while you've been talking, and we think you've given us enough value for money that you deserve a CPD certificate. And so
it's also a certificate for our listeners to download. And I've got some news for you, Julian.
Oh,
I was beholden to or assailed by one of our listeners the other day, who not only thanked us greatly for introducing a couple of our guests to them, which has also not only led to an extra course and a book and a purchase.
Wow.
But they've also put Vet Ramblings down on their RCPS CPD reflection claim.
fantastic. And why not?
Wow.
And they've actually named it. They've actually put it down as a proper thing. I won't name the lecturer at risk of alienating others because I simply do not have the evidence to say that other people have not done this. But I do have the evidence that this one particular vet has done it, has done that.
Brilliant. We've actually produced enough Veterinary Ramblings shows now for it to make a considerable dent in your yearly CPD requirement. You put down all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's nearly 300 hours of reflection.
Yeah. Not far off that. But here we go. So we've got certificate of being real wildcats. There's a little.
Lovely.
That's a dolphin.
Well, that's a seal there.
Oh, that's a seal in the middle.
That's a seal.
Right. Okay.
Now that's a seal that I saw in Oban when I was there last.
Very nice.
There's a snow leopard.
Yeah.
A fave.
There we
My
go.
favourite.
Is that the one from Chessington?
No, that's the one Port Limp Zoo.
All right. I was going to say, if it's the one of the ones from Chessington, I anaesthetised that one.
Did you? I bottle fed one of them.
I did both of them.
Did you?
Yeah.
I bottle fed. They had kittens a mere 28 years ago. I bottle fed them.
I was going to say, it's a long time ago.
The wildcat. That's my cat. That's not a wildcat. And what she's doing there is she's looking at the clock because she knows it's coming up for supper time.
Dinner time. Oh.
And she's just about to get wild if you haven't fed her.
And what she does, if we haven't fed her, is she knocks the clock off the mantelpiece.
It's quite symbolic.
Reaches her hand out, pop, off it goes, and then she pretends it wasn't her. There's a dolphin.
It's a good dolphin.
There's a dolphin. There's someone diving.
Okay.
And that was because I wanted to show you the picture below, which is the loch in Oban, which I swam in.
Lovely.
And
Did you
I
get a
wonder-
leech on you?
I didn't get a leech on me.
You weren't trying hard enough.
I did get a nice collection of oysters, which I had for my dinner,
Mm.
and then realised it was a marine conservation area.
Whoopsie.
If I were to snorkel there again, I would wear one of these thick diving suits because it was very, very cold.
Very cold.
I was in there for a little under an hour, and
I think most people would get cold at that point.
it was chilly. I shook. I had shivering thermogenesis,
Oh, lovely.
utilising all of my brown fat tissue, which is quite a lot, for about an hour and a half.
It's a great workout.
I was unable to hold a glass of whiskey because it kept on shaking out. So
It's when you say to the barman, please just pour it straight into my mouth.
I did.
Imagine I'm a polar bear and it's cod liver oil.
But there you go. A very well earned CPD certificate.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's brilliant stuff. Well, I don't know what more, other than perhaps to say thank you very much indeed, Rebecca Amos, for sharing an insight into your fascinating life and the animals that you share it with. And
My pleasure.
if you've enjoyed listening on Veterinary Ramblings, don't forget, log in on veterinaryramblings.com, click like, share, please share, and please subscribe,
That's good.
because it does make a difference to us and enables us to bring fascinating people like Rebecca to your ears. So, Rebecca Amos, thank you very much indeed. May
My
your
pleasure.
dog go with you.
May your dog go with you.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Slanger.
Slam.
And cut.